Welcome to Across the Ring. My name is William Mayhem Michaels.
And this is the scientist, Carl Schupfer. And today we are here with Zach MacOrmac of MacOrmac Image Works. Zach, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you guys doing today?
We're doing great, Zach. So, Zach, before we get started, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
All right. So, MacOrmac Image Works. So, I am a uh, photography business, a little bit of my side hustle. So, I started out with a little bit of photography with wrestling. So, of course, you may see me ringside at a few Arizona promotions. But there I basically just photograph ringside. Then I'll come home, do some extensive editing, and then you'll see me selling some of my work on the side. But other than that, I also um, do personal family shoots, group party shoots, things like that. And I'll come up with a full suite of edits for my clients, as well as um, you know some nifty little art pieces for them as well as they see fit. So um, I've been doing this for about 4 years steady, but I've had a little bit of a lifetime with photography.
Awesome. So, kind of getting into that, how did you first get into photography?
Well, since I was a kid, my mom, she went to the Art Institute of Pittsburgh for photography, and she was always a bit of an avid photographer. Kept a 35 millimeter around, and she'd always let me play around with like the little wind and click throwaway cameras all the time, and I always had a good time playing with those. I wasn't great at it, of course, being a little kid, but later on, I would move into trying out the digital format. My stepdad bought a digital camera one day. It was a brick, a big old brick of just a point and shoot, T and W buttons,
Mhm.
zoom in and out, and I would play with that all the time. More than my stepdad did, who fully intended on using it for his fishing trips and whatnot. But that would later move on to my interest in journalism. So, high school and college, I would go on to study journalism, and but it seemed like I would be much more interested in the visual aspect of that.
Mhm.
So I went into newspapers. Um, so that's where I learned about Photoshop, InDesign, various other programs that we would use to create our publications, and from there I would eventually get into a very short career with newspaper journalism. But of course, it unfortunately it wouldn't last for too long. I was coming out of college in 2009, and you know the newspaper landscape wasn't too great, wasn't too lucrative for myself, so I would eventually move on from there. But I would take a bit of a hiatus from around 2012 onward until the opportunity arose um, to speak with Gabe at the Arizona Wrestling Federation, and then I would kind of carry on from there, photographing for them. So it's just kind of a lifelong kind of start stop situation. Just learning to love photography at different times in my life.
Absolutely, and I totally get that. I was like yourself. I was very much into photography and videography at a young age. I had those disposable cameras as well, just click and shoot all the time. And my dad had an old like VHS camera, like the
Mm-hmm.
camcorders, but they were like this big.
Oh yeah.
And me and my friends at that time, that was around when Jackass really started taking off. So we started
Mm-hmm.
getting into the whole let's be like them, or let's do backyard wrestling, let's do this. And but I always wanted to be behind the camera, kind of shooting. Like you, I did take photography class. I took photography classes. I took film classes. I took film history in high school and in college. A bunch of different stuff like that. And like you said earlier, before we started the interview, like photography is a study of light, and I mean you're absolutely right when it comes to that. Um, so I know you mentioned Gabriel going into this, like because as you were graduating college, we're getting into like this big digital world in '09. You probably graduated in like '05, '04 from high
Mm-hmm.
school. Was that sound about right?
Right.
Yeah. And so we graduated at the same time, so we hit that road into like, here comes Facebook. MySpace was a thing, but Facebook is coming, and little did we know that the internet was going to take over the world, right? And
Right.
so you said that you met Gabriel, and was that your first introduction into like pro wrestling, or how did you get introduced to wrestling?
Well, wrestling itself, it's been a part of my life, as much as photography had been. So, um, whenever I was little, of course, I knew about wrestling. I knew who
Mhm.
Hulk Hogan was and Randy Savage and Bret Hart. I knew those kids. I grew up in Pittsburgh, so Pittsburgh's a big wrestling city, and tons of kids they would have the wrestling action figures. They would always talk about the events. There's one kid who came to school. He's like, yeah, Bret Hart gave me the shades, and he wore them until someone stole them. So, that was a thing. But then one day, I had to see it for myself to actually, um, really like get into it. So
Mhm.
my stepdad was actually really into pro wrestling. Like he had a buddy when he was growing up who actually jobbed Dusty Rhodes. He
Oh
yeah
my
took
gosh.
took took the bionic elbow for the pin. But I walk into the living room and he has it on. My mom has always hated pro wrestling. It's fake, right? It's like, don't say that. But um I walk into the living room. Of course, the first face I see on television, first wrestling promo and match was delivered by Goldust. So
Ooh.
I was maybe about 9, 10 years old, and I see the screen like that's I wasn't expecting quite that, but I was intrigued though.
Yeah.
Um, because you hear about Hulk Hogan, Randy, Bret
Mhm.
Hart, Razor Ramon, all those guys, and they seem like regular guys fighting. I didn't really understand that they all had their own personalities, but then I kind of quickly picked up on it that everyone's a little bit different. At the time, I was also really into Mortal Kombat, so I always the way I got into it is like the same way I got into Mortal Kombat. There's so many individual characters, and you always want to
Mhm.
see like how they're going to blend together and face each other, and who's going to come out winning. And um, that was really like the jumping off point. Is like I would sit there and draw new wrestlers. I'd have my action figures. I'd make my own little toy federation. Later on, I would I'd go on and continue watching for a number of years, as long as I was able to get home from school and or whatever I was doing at night, watch it on TV, and then eventually I would fall out with it, for a bit. High school, I was always doing a thousand things, so
Mhm.
um, yeah, I wasn't able to pick it up again until DVR was really available, and then ever since about 2011 or so, I've been watching at least WWE nonstop. Every other promotion, I try to pick it up as I go. TNA, I'd come in and out with it because they would jump channel to channel, and
Mhm.
I'd depends on if they were same thing with Ring of Honor, that they were it was always depending on if my cable provider decided to give me that channel that day. But I would get absorb as much as I can because I was just so fascinated with it, and I knew one day I would really need to get involved with it. So that's where we are today.
That's pretty awesome. I feel like myself, I also kind of came in around that same time of like the new generation, especially like towards the end of it, like 95, 96, somewhere in there. That was kind of a heyday for me. I used to watch a lot of the old videotapes and stuff like that, and that was kind of like my introduction as well. And I thought that those characters were pretty funny, especially the stuff between like Gold Dust and Razor and stuff like that. Like that stuff was great. So yeah,
Absolutely.
that's pretty sweet that you came from kind of a similar era.
Mm-hmm.
I,
Yep.
I I was always a big fan of Goldust because I mean, as we're speaking about photography, the 24 gold production, right? Like
Mhm.
I always loved the imagery that Goldust used. Like he honed that craft into being a wrestler, and like he always told a story with his character. You know what I mean? And that's one of the things that I loved about him as well. And I find that interesting that that was the very first match
Mhm.
that you saw. Like that's kind of
Yeah.
lined
Yeah.
up
That
for you.
I'm not sure against who. That I don't remember. I just remember it really being gold dust. But yeah, just all the and what would really actually amaze me more is like as I was watching more and more, I remember we would eventually watch, of course. My next kind of block of memory was whenever was it Bash at the Beach '96 came around, though, the NWO, and I didn't really understand the implications of it at the time. But Hulk Hogan comes out, he's the third man, and then my stepdad loses his mind, and I was like, "What's the big deal?" He's a bad guy. He's bad now. No, he can't be. But you know, it, but all these little nuggets would fascinate me as time would go on. I always hold that moment of flipping back and forth in the channels whenever Vince and Shane were battling back and forth on um, on Nitro and on Raw, just over the ownership. And I remember that being like a surreal moment. Like, is this really happening right now? But yeah, those were always like those things that would fascinate me about is it's not like any other form of entertainment, and that's
Mhm.
um, it presents itself as real, but of course it's not. We know it's very very much a form of theater, but
Right, right.
it's just so unique. I couldn't help but be drawn to it.
Yeah. Hey, that's why we're all here, right? We all kind of share that
Mhm.
passion, and that's how we kind of got pulled into it. We talked a lot about, kind of your inspirations as a wrestling fan. Who are, some of the influences that you have into like your photography, like as you like hone your craft?
So with my photography, it's been mainly a lot of self teaching from the start whenever I picked it up in 2019, again like with an actual DSLR. But so the people that would like influence me most with wrestling photography um, would be those who I'd follow along with on Instagram and also interact with in person. Um, so I try to get a little bit from everybody. Um, so one, this is a little series of shout outs. Of course, there's Fowl, who's worked extensively with AWF, but also travels the region, and he
Mhm.
does a lot of photography, videography, and of course graphic design. Um, and just kind of see the way that he does his work has inspired me to kind of do my own style with
Yeah.
the little 8x10s that I do. Another guy I work with, Shore, he got his business Shore Shots, but
Short
Ryan
shot.
Shore.
Mhm.
Yeah, he's Shorzy as I call him. But yeah, but yeah, he always has like unique ways to really like enhance his game. Like he always brings like a new toy to the table.
Mhm.
He brings like old school film cameras. He's had Polaroids, and just kind of he really likes to play with light in ways that
Mhm.
are really quite unique. Um, and then there's another guy, Cody, CJE Images. I've worked with him a few times. He does pretty great work with the like his lighting. So he does great light work. Um, you'll see like I use a flash. He actually rarely does. He does sometimes, but if he's in a very 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 dark room, but he's able to really adapt in those situations, create some great images. Um, and then some guys that I see online who I haven't met yet. There's one guy, Iban Huerta is his handle. I'm not sure his actual name, but I believe he shoots for PWG. Gets some amazing like artistic shots. And then same thing with a couple guys I see from the Vegas scene. Electric Sleep Images, I believe
Mhm.
his handle. Amazing portraiture, great usage of light, and his ringside is top notch. And then another guy, Bionic Scoop is his handle, and he does great with like no flash, super low light, and amazing editing. So I like to kind of study all of those works, and of course among others. Um, and Kimber Lasky, she's the one who does
Yeah.
a lot of the long distance shots.
Mhm.
WWE, AEW. It seems like she's always up in the crowd, but she does a lot of that like like telephoto type work, and her editing is astounding. So so all of those influences have kind of been driving me to try to up my quality and really bring the best type of photography to my audience for sure. So
And it's funny that you mentioned Short Shot and Fatu, because you and those two are the main ones that we receive shots from when we're like, hey, we need promo shots, we this, we that. It's always you three that's like, here it is, here it is, here it is. And I'm like, well, it seems like there's only three guys taking photos. So, but yeah, I'm familiar with the other ones that you announced off as well, because I'm on Instagram quite a bit. Always looking for talent, and and that's typically how I find it, is through the photographers pages, especially in our region in Arizona, Texas, Cali, and Vegas. Who was your biggest supporter when you decided to get into photography in wrestling?
So that was actually my wife, definitely the biggest supporter. So at the time, I was kind of going through a rut. I work for a bank. Can't say which one because of course, I work for a corporation. If you say their name outside of work, then they get mad at you. But I was working as a teller. I've since moved on from the teller position and went and did something else. But I was in a bit of a rut, so I was just kind of looking around, like what could I do differently. I'd been doing that for about 4 years, and I was exhausted. I needed a change of pace. So she saw that AWF was accepting positions, and she's like, "Well, you love wrestling, so I mean, they're looking for they said they're looking for someone to work in creative." I was like, "Yeah, that'd be really cool. Like we've been to a bunch of their shows. Like that'd be." I would sit down and interview with Gabriel, and he said more than anything, like we need photographers. I saw, you on your resume, you're a reporter photographer, at a past job. It's like, well, yeah, I could do photography. He's like, can you get a camera? I could probably buy a camera by Friday. Yeah, I ended up getting my first like Canon Rebel T6. Like it's the one that you can get at a Walmart or a Target, just like
Yeah.
the basic kit. And at the time, they're running shows out of the formerly the Odyssey in that little atrium center area. It was bad. Not their shows. Their shows were pretty
Yeah.
fun, but my
Yeah.
photography
The
was
photography.
bad.
Yeah, I think I started out with the Rebel 5. So
Yeah.
I know what you mean. Because you get like the whole kit, and it's like
Mhm.
$300 or something. It's not, it's nothing like,
Well,
dramatic, but
and one of the things too is that no matter what craft you're working in, whether you're a wrestler, a photographer, what have you, even being a podcaster, at first your stuff is not going to be good, right? Like it's all about reps, it's all about experience, right? Like it takes a lot of time to get to where you're actually good enough to, be doing stuff like this, right? So, of course, you're going to start, in a place where you're not necessarily doing the kind of work you're doing now, because I mean, unless you're some sort of crazy prodigy or something, right? Like you're going to have these different points of learning and stuff like that, and the equipment's going to come with that as well, right? Like starting out, you shouldn't get the craziest, biggest, best camera, because what if you get into this thing and all of a sudden you're like, I suck at this and I don't want to be better at it, all of a
it's
sudden,
terrible.
right? Then you got like this like couple $1,000 kit or something that you put together because you think that that's gonna be the way to go, and then all of a sudden you're like, crap, now I got really expensive dust collectors going on here. So that makes a lot of
Yeah,
sense that you started that way.
exactly. And like it I mean, yeah, it started out cheap, and the photography wasn't great. I was like, okay, let's point and shoot and just see what happens. And everything was grainy. It was, everything was a bit blurry. Not the greatest. Like that's kind of the weird thing about wrestling. Of course, you're not going to get into it for the money. Wrestling photography, at least like when you're starting out, but like you need to have some decent, some half decent equipment to really get some like if you really want some still like frozen life kind of stuff. And that's not to say you can't get. I did get some amazing shots, but they were few and far between. But I definitely stuck with it because I really had the support of a lot of the talent and the promoters. One of the first main event that I ever shot actually had a Seifa Fatu, also Sola Sokoa currently,
Mhm.
and he was AWF's champion, and he walked up, he introduced himself to me. He's told me his name. We introduced her, and then we exchanged emails. Like, yeah, I'll send you the photos after. He's like, thank you, of course, keep doing what you're doing. He signed off by calling me Oos. I think that was like the biggest thing for me. He called me Oos.
That's awesome. Yeah.
That's pretty
Phyllis
cool.
Sokoa called me Oos once.
That's cool.
Um, and then the first match I ever shot, Jacob Austin Young, but known at the time Jay Cafe because he had a coffee gimmick or something, and then
Mhm.
Aiden Colt. So our
I
mutual
love
friend Aiden
Aiden.
Colt.
We know I'm a fanboy for Aiden.
Yeah, he was keeping me on my toes.
Oh yeah.
He had Jay in a headlock. He's like, the camera guy, just pointing at me. I was like, all right, gotcha.
Oh man. Well,
He and Aiden is so aware of where he's at in the ring because I was down in PWL this weekend for collateral damage. Prior to that, they had Marty Scroll in doing a seminar, so I was doing some photos and shooting for them, and then the PWL show. And Aiden was like, he would look straight at me, and it was like he was telling me, "You have to get this," you know what I mean, without saying it. But yeah, it's I love that guy.
you de-
But it
Yeah,
you can definitely tell what wrestlers are like aware of cameras and stuff that are around the arena,
Mhm.
because not every wrestler is aware enough to like either make eye contact with the camera or to kind of work towards what you're doing. And when someone does, that's when you get your best work. And I feel like it can really change how the experience is on film when you're done.
exactly. Yeah, a lot of the there there is a bit of a separation I've noticed. Like, the guys who know, what I create, like they need that, versus there's the folks that come in and they travel all over the place. They don't really need, what I'm producing. So, a lot of
Mhm.
the bigger names that come in, they don't often, they I'll offer to, hey, let's do some portraits or something. I had one famous wrestler. I offered, like, hey, let's do a shoot. He's like, I'm just, I'm just in one of these moods where I'm just like, I don't know if I really want to, but maybe I could, maybe I could or couldn't. And it's like, just say no, man.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
absolutely fine. That's more for me and less for you. I get it,
Right.
but
Right, right.
but I get all my best work off of, you know, kind of the ones that are on the rise. Like, a lot of my best work is of our another mutual friend of ours, Paradox.
I love that guy.
He's
Yeah.
yeah he I shot his first match,
Mhm.
and that's one thing between he and I, is that when he started, it was during those Odyssey shows. It was like the third or fourth one,
Mhm.
and we've just been like kind of together. We've actually become, like, almost de facto best friends out of the whole thing. We'll message back and forth on Instagram. We just BS with one another. He's kind of like
Mhm.
my guy. When I go there, I have to, I'll have to seek him out, and we'll have a chat about what the event entails and everything. But
Mhm.
um, but we really, love supporting each other. I love supporting, the talent that are on the rise. Like, we have, it's kind of hard to see unless you really blow up the screen there, but a bit of a model for a future T-shirt that I made for Paradox there. Um, and
Nice.
but he and I, we really have bonded over this idea that our careers have gone parallel, just
Mhm.
in their own way. And in the way that I've gotten so good, so has he. Like, his first matches were um squashes, but
Yeah.
but I remember always hearing him getting advice from everybody, just same as I was. And now we're kind of, you know the faces you always see at AWF now. So it's really, been quite the journey, and having his support has really been something that's, kind of been pushing me forward too. So shout out to Paradox.
Yeah, and I really like working with Paradox as well. My stuff is not really photography. My thing's more of a video because with our episodes, I like to air my own footage as far as the beginning of the episode and the ending of the episode goes. And sometimes I'm lucky enough I get to get up on the ring and do that, and sometimes don't even think about it, but it's cool either way. I love working with the talent and getting to know everybody. I think I met you at our I think I introduced myself at the most recent one for AWF, which was Reckoning.
Ascension.
Ascension.
Or,
It was Ascension because Reckoning was in the cage, right? I
right.
think. Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went to the one from this weekend with the newer talent that are kind of up and coming, which they had Chewy and Lorenzo for the main event, and I got all of his match for him, and I'm like, hey, I'll send it to you, that type of thing. But yeah, like as I'm getting into this, it's asking a lot of questions, like, hey, because I don't know, you know what I mean? Like there's a lot of information to gain. And I think me and Carl were actually talking about this earlier today. If nothing else, you need to learn one new thing today.
Right.
You know what I mean? And that's the only way we're going to get better.
Yeah. And I think that the other side of that is, talking about this great relationship you have with Paradox. I think that one of the coolest things that we've gotten, starting to get involved is, the relationships that you start to form with, these different guys that wrestle or women as well. Just getting, everybody that kind of works in wrestling as you go to these shows and you see the same faces, having that rapport with people, is really cool, and like making new friends and stuff like that. As adults, it's a little harder to make friends. It's not like you're just around people all the time, so like having an opportunity to like make new friends and connections like that, I think is, really important. But we've talked at length about your career and talking about photography, but when you're not doing wrestling stuff, when you're not doing photography, like what do you like to do?
Well, when not photographing wrestling, of course, I'm watching wrestling. Of course, WWE is the one that I have all the access to. But I really wish AEW would put their stuff on Hulu. This AEW do it. If you're listening, I don't know. Please, it's a great podcast, I swear. But also, I have a big family here in the house. So I have myself, my wife, 3 step-kids, a kid of my own. So 4 altogether. And we're always doing stuff together. We're always looking for that next adventure. A couple months ago, we just went out to California, like visit the Disney parks and Universal and everything. Then next month we're doing a little bit of a road trip in the middle of June. So we'll be we're trying to fill in all the states on this little map that we have. So we're gonna drive down through Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Florida. So we haven't filled in that block yet. I've been to some of those states before, but my family hasn't. We like to have little gatherings and stuff. We have 4 birthdays to celebrate throughout the year, one for each season, coincidentally. Winter, spring, summer, autumn. There's one like every 3 months. We'll do that. We'll bring the kids to the wrestling shows as well. Of course, we'll whenever I can, I always love to fire up a video game or something, though it's kind of hard anymore. So I mean, currently I'm trucking through probably my 3rd playthrough of like Fallout 4. So so that's one of my long time since kids kind of hobbies, of course, video games. My wife hates it, but what can you do?
I think we can all attest to that one.
No. No,
there's
my
always
wife loves it.
Yeah, well,
she's telling me like, so my wife's big into like the storylines when it comes to video gaming. So she'll actually be like, hey, I just ordered you this new video game. I want to watch you play it. I swear to God, she does it all the time.
Yeah.
Drives me crazy. But I was like you, like my family, we travel all over the United States and we get the magnets for the each state. So we're trying to like put the United States together. But yeah, we do that
That's
same
pretty cool.
thing. Yeah. Go ahead, Carl. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, it's all right. I think that as a whole, life gets so busy when we're older, but we all have these hobbies and interests that have stemmed since we were young, right? Like wrestling,
Mhm.
something since we're young, photography since you're young, video games since you're young. And it's cool that, as life goes on, these things that were a staple of your life early on continue to be part of your life. And now, with like wrestling, you talk about bringing your family to wrestling shows. It sounds like you're starting to share these passions with your family as well, which I think is, a really cool thing.
Absolutely. Like the kids are still a little young yet, not quite mature enough yet. That I trust them with one of my cameras just yet. The 14-year-old's kind of getting there, but I mean,
Yeah.
within the next couple of years, I think she and I will probably sit down because she's a visual artist, so
Mhm.
she loves her painting and everything. But that's something I'm definitely looking forward to, is like really introducing them to that medium for sure.
Yeah, and I can definitely relate that as well. My oldest daughter is she turns 13 and she's the same way. She loves painting, drawing. She's absolutely phenomenal. Loves messing around with the camera as well. Which I'm a big supporter of when it comes to art because I did art when I was younger as well. Not so much anymore. If I do it now, I'm drawing cartoons for my kids, but Carl's more of our graphics guy, and I think he does a great job. So I let him go ahead and nail that out. More work for him,
Yeah,
but
yeah. But yeah,
Well,
yeah, but yeah, it's super cool that I feel like we have a lot of similar hobbies, and like
Mhm.
it's cool that like different connections, whether it's like the video games or the wrestling or the photography or the fact that you guys both have these families that you're sharing these passions with. There's it's cool that even though we do different things, we have all these like things that are so in common, and like the fact that I'm in Milwaukee and you're down there, you're in the South, like, who would have thought that we'd be able to have a conversation with this? And, this guy that you've never interacted before, like all of a sudden now, like, you're like, hey, like this is someone that has, similar interests as me. It's crazy how the world works like that.
exactly. Yeah, it is like kind of the last network that you'd expect to build and actually really benefit from is the
Mhm.
pro wrestling network, because you meet just so many people, just not only just because it's cool to meet wrestlers, but so many people in like your particular media passion and everything. So many people you can talk to about like these things that you love. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. So to kind of transition back and talk a little bit about your career, you've been doing photography for a few years now, for wrestling and for other things. What are some of the things that you think about when it comes to like your goals for like the future or things that you're trying to build towards as a photographer?
Sure. So as a photographer now, I need to, of course, get a bit more active with my social media. I need to stop letting myself descend into old Fogieville, and I need to uh, get like the kids and post a lot more, and make more of that interesting content.
Mhm.
But raising 4 kids, I kind of like I have to have a balance, unfortunately. But I do want to eventually grow, expand, really get a lot more eyes on my product, be able to book more appointments, not just wrestling related, but of course get some more portraits out there. And I know Will, if you're going to my Instagram page, you saw I got every once in a while kind of spatter in like hey, look, I'm something that's not wrestling.
Yep. Yep.
I recently did a coworker of mine and his family, and I made some little graphics for them for their like little family shoot. So
Yeah, I did
I
see
I
that. That
want
was super cute. I did
I
like
want to
that.
I want to eventually expand to the point that I can do weddings now. Like I don't thing is like a lot of people do weddings, it's just they take one camera and go, but I feel like I wouldn't be doing a wedding justice with the equipment that I have. I do have a lot of equipment, like it has its almost its own room in the house, but I don't have a secondary camera. I don't have a giant lighting system. I have a couple of flash bulbs and a couple of stage lights, but nothing to really like do justice to something like that. But I would love to expand into that realm. I would also love to, of course, move into larger pro wrestling venues and be able to photograph there too, whether it be ringside or backstage, doing either their portrait work or the ringside work. So that'd be wonderful. But currently, I think I'd just like to, stay the course, the way I am with the pro wrestling, and kind of, expand my horizons more into your retail photography, have it be a good viable way to earn some money, put some cash away for some college for the kids,
Yeah, yeah.
But I'd love to have a brick and mortar store one day and a studio, but I'm fully mobile too, so that's my thing right now. I can't have brick and mortar, but I have a giant duffel bag with everything in it.
I feel like that's kind of like our same goal. Like we want to be brick and mortar one day as well, where we're not broadcasting from across the United States. Because like you, I'm traveling all over the place trying to, promote the podcast and whatnot, and meeting a lot of interesting people, but living out of a bag, and it's a lot of equipment. I mean, I don't even do this professionally, so I can only imagine the type of equipment that you have compared to mine. But and it's like we spoke on earlier, it's definitely about the connections that you make with these other people to help you kind of get to that next level. You know what I mean? I got super lucky talking with Aiden Colt, and he introduced us to Caesar with PWL, which allowed me to go backstage and get kind of like those funny moments, which I had to be really careful because, with wrestling, you have the masked wrestlers back there, but they're not wearing their masks. So you got to be like, before I post this, what's going on in this whole picture? You know what I mean? But I think it's really cool that you want to expand into wrestling and get into a bigger business, and like us, we want to get to the point where we can live off of this. This is what we do for a living. Of course, that's not the case. We have our real jobs, right?
Right.
But
So yeah, so talking about you have these goals and stuff, and it sounds like you have a lot of really good ideas, and I think we're rooting for you to get there. As someone that's you've kind of gone through a bit of a journey already, if someone was to come to you today and be like, hey, I really want to get into photography and I really want to start doing either wrestling or something like wrestling, like maybe another sport or something like that, what would be like advice you'd give to someone that wanted to do something like that?
Well, I think if they really wanted to do that, I think they would first want to establish a connection, like at least a foot in the door. So of course mine was AWF, and for the longest time AWF was just my ride or die. That was it. That's all I was going to. I would occasionally show up at like a Party Hard wrestling show whenever they were independent of each other, and photograph from the crowd. I'd get a good like bird's eye view from like an upper seat or something like that. But I was never actually like affiliated with other companies for a while. But it's like definitely make a name with one company first. Post as often as you can. Learn to edit. It's not all with the camera. Familiarize yourself with Lightroom. Photoshop can come later. Lightroom is super simple as far as like editing a blocks of photos. Program your camera to shoot in RAW. You're gonna get your best results that way. Convert them to JPEGs later after you make the changes you need. Learn all the differences between aperture, shutter speed, and ISO, and how those affect your exposure values. And let's see, and do your research. Great website to recommend if you're watching this and thinking about getting into photography, cameradecision.com. It's a great place to look at comparisons of cameras, and they give ratings as to what cameras do best in certain scenarios. However, all of those brackets, I mean, you're probably best going for something that does well in sports photography, but sports photography is often thought of as something you're doing courtside or outside. So maybe look into like, tips for like theater photography. It's its own beast. Plus, all the pieces are moving very fast, so that makes it a little bit more difficult. It really is its own beast. So be ready for that. Be ready to experiment with wrestling photography. Get ready for learning what to do in low light, updating your ISO to something reasonable, but not that you're getting a product too grainy, that you're shooting wide open, so that, as in shooting with the widest aperture, so that you can get the brightest values possible, and then finding a balance on your shutter speed, so you're not blurred, but then you're not, but you're capturing, every bit of the action. The lower the shutter speed, the more light comes in, but the higher shutter speed, you have no light. But then you need that to capture the action. It is really like a puzzle. Photography is a puzzle, and the science of light for real. But start out small. Start out small. Don't buy anything too big. Save about $1,000 and to get your first kit. Let it go from there.
Yeah.
That's a lot. Sorry.
That's, you probably just gave whoever listens to this like $10,000 piece of advice right there with it.
I would say so. Yeah.
Like the stuff that you kind of explained right there is stuff that, a lot of times you have to learn that in a class, and, for you to break down a bunch of stuff real quick on someone that's just trying to get into it, that can help out quite a bit. So I think that that's really awesome that, you're giving out, tips like that can really help someone that's trying to get started to, be able to do stuff that, maybe they admire the stuff you do and now they want to do it too. Like you do such great work that I could see someone be inspired and want to do that as well.
Well, once again, Zach, I would like to thank you for coming on Across the Ring.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, brother. It's been a pleasure. I would like to remind everyone to follow Zach on Instagram. Zach, you want to go ahead and shout out your Instagram real quick?
Absolutely. It's at MacOrmac Image Works. That's all one phrase, no dashes, no dots or punctuation. Also on Facebook as well under the same name. And also find me at my website. It's lightfolio.macormacimageworks.com. I might actually have that backwards. It might be MacOrmac Image Works, so .lightfolio.com. I always get that confused somehow. Or email me at MacOrmacImageWorks, no punctuation, at gmail.com for any inquiries as well. I want to get on to TikTok eventually. I'm slow to that game. I'm in my mid-30s and I apologize.
I'm the guy for that. You can holler at me about that later. But anyways, make sure you follow us as well on Across the Ring on Instagram. No spaces, no dashes, no nothing. Make sure you check us out on all platforms: Spotify, Apple, Google, Amazon. We're literally on everything. Also check out our YouTube page at Across the Ring as well. We're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram.